Because I went to the local health food store and I saw that the local honey was $7.50 per pound, but people were actually buying Manuka honey from New Zealand in the same store that was $20 for an 8-ounce jar, which is $40 a pound. I was so intrigued that I bought some Manuka honey from New Zealand myself to try, and my children said, well, it's not bad, but ours is better. And I had to agree because our Manuka honey is very potent with medicinal qualities, but it's not to say that other honeys are in any way inferior.
How much honey are you producing a year?
I average long-term 20 to 25 pounds per colony per year, but it includes the splits of the same year. So meaning if I have one hive, but I turned it into 3 colonies, it will be 20 to 20 to 20 to 60. It's almost like having 60 per hive if you don't split it, but then I also have 3 hives out of 1. So if you were to really push them for honey production, you can possibly have much more, but it depends on local conditions and also on whether you feed your bee sugar, something we'll discuss later in this one. So, and it may not be a lot in terms of the quantity, but the quality, as we'll discuss now, is something that's very hard to find anymore. So the first thing that I tell so I had 100 pounds to sell. I put it on my website, and I thought if nobody wants it for $20 a pound, which was half the price of the Manuka honey in the local health food stores, we'll just eat it ourselves or give it to friends or whatever. No, I sold this first 100 pounds proper within a few weeks. When I had the last jar left, somebody placed an order for 100 pounds through the website. Without calling, without asking for a deal on the 100 pounds, it just, 100 pounds at $20, $2,000 transaction on the website. And I called the customer in Alabama and said, I only have 1 jar left. And it turned out that they were a food call, and one of their members discovered my honey and was raving to other members of the food cooperative about how great it was, so everybody was intrigued and they put together an order for their membership, so they figured they could use 100 jars. Well, they ended up buying this 1 jar that I had left and said, do you mind keeping the money for the rest of the jars until the next year? So we're first in line, and you may be aware that if you have a credit card transaction, you can only dispute it for 180 days. So they were trusting me with $2,000 until the next year, knowing that if I don't deliver, they won't be able to get their money back through the credit card company. So it was a sign of trust, but I had to refuse because I didn't want to be under contractual obligation to deliver even 100 pounds the following year. It sometimes happens, and it never happened to me, but the books say that in most locations, 1 year out of 20 or 1 year out of 10, depending on where you live, may be so bad that the bees don't produce any surplus at all. They barely have enough for their own survival. So if this happened to me, I wouldn't want to be under contract to pull 100 pounds of honey from the bees and seeing them starve or feeding them sugar water instead, just to fill the contract. So I refunded them the money, and they had to place a new order in the next year. But this taught me from the very get-go, there are people who are valuing pure, real things. And they're prepared to pay more money for it than for the other things that are honey in the name only. So the first thing that I explained to potential customers on my website and on flyers that I include with my honey, in your handout packet, there is a flyer called the Wilderness Ozark Honey that I include with each jar of honey that we sell. It explains just how different it is from the conventional stuff. So the number one thing that I emphasize is, do you realize that most of the honey consumed in America is not of American origin? Do you know that?
Yes.
Up to 75%, between 2/3 and 3/4 of honey each year consumed in America comes from abroad, including from what country? China. Thank you. And it's no surprise because China is the largest honey producer in the world.
Don't they also combine it, like 6 or 7, all these producers and then package it?
Yeah, there you go. So, this Chinese honey, too, is being sold by the farmers there at 25 cents a pound. So because of that, if all of this 20 cent a pound honey was allowed to enter America with no taxes, it would put many of the larger honey producers out of business. They won't be able to compete. So the American Honey Board lobbied the federal government to impose the tax on the border. If you bring honey from China, you need to pay the government $1 per pound in duties to level up the playing grounds to make it $1.25 in cost to the importer rather than 25 cents. Since they did that, China fell off the list of the largest exporters of honey into the U.S. So guess what country usually now leads the list every year of being the largest exporter of honey to the United States?
Mexico.
No, I heard several and no, most of the year this is Vietnam. And what's interesting about Vietnam, which by the way shares the border with China, is that the domestic production of Vietnam of honey is less than what they export to America. Vietnam produces less honey than what they export. Then guess where all of this wonderful Vietnamese honey is coming from? China. Figure. Well, how are they doing it? Well, very simply, if you put your honey on the truck and take it to Vietnamese port and load it in the container there and declare that it's product of Vietnam, you save $1 per pound. And that one barrel is 660 pounds, so you save $660 on each barrel of honey that you can import. Some importers bring millions of pounds every year, so the incentive of taking Chinese honey to Vietnam, loading it in the container there, and declaring it as Vietnamese honey is tremendous. That's why Vietnam is now the largest exporter of honey to the United States. It's very easy to tell whether honey is coming from Vietnam or China, actually. What can you do to determine the country of origin? Pollen, thank you. You take a sample of honey, put it under the microscope, and you look at the pollen inside the honey. And different plants have different shapes of pollen, and there are computer programs that they can identify them, and they just spew out the list of plants, and they even tell you where these plants grow. So if you have the analysis of pollen and it shows that these are the plants that grow in China, not in Vietnam, you would have evidence that it's been transshipped and it is a jailable offense, and some people serve jail terms in this country for bringing honey through Vietnam to avoid taxation at the border. Now, what do you do if you want to bring in 10 million pounds of honey and save $10 million and not go to jail?
Right.
Right. Diluting will not change the presence of pollen there. Yeah.
Get it FDA approved.
Yeah. Yeah, what would you?
Mix it.
Well, but mixing will still have the Chinese pollen in there.
Filter it out.
Then the filter, you need to filter pollen out. And filtering pollen in air or in liquid requires the 2-micron filter. These are the masks that we're wearing, 2 microns. So if you have this N95 mask, try pouring honey on it, will it drip through easily? No. So how do you filter honey through the face mask? Pressure. You need to heat it and use high pressure, and that's exactly why they do it. There are special machines that you can look them up online. They're for sale for the honey business. You pour the 55-gallon drum in, you press the button, the whole thing is heated to 150 degrees and high pressure and put through filtering paper, so every speck of pollen is removed. Yes? Well, is it a good thing to do to honey? No. Not only it kills many of the good things in honey, it also starts converting the fruit sugars, fructose and glucose. There is a chemical reaction and starts forming into these nasty chemicals that are not very good for you. Okay, it's not good for the honey. But do you know what they do next? They buy some Vietnamese pollen and they put some into the ground like that and mix it together. Now at the border you can take as many samples as you like. You put it under the microscope and it gives you the list of the Vietnamese plants that contributed pollen to this drum of honey.
change the.
Yeah, it does. It will show in the analysis that it's been heated, but you cannot have the proof anymore that it is from China. And that's all they care about. It is legal to bring heated honey into the US. What they're trying to avoid is being caught as transshipping from Vietnam. Alright, so people will tell you, oh, I've never seen a jar of honey at Walmart that says product of China on the label. Have you? It will say maybe Brazil or Australia or Canada, but not China. So understanding that probably 60% of the honey consumed in this country is from China, or Vietnam, if you like. Where does all of this Vietnamese honey go to if you never see it in jars in the stores?
Distributed by.
Several things. One is if you use honey as an ingredient in honey energy bars, in granola, in yogurt, in honey roasted ham, whatever, peanuts, or if it is ingredient, you are not required by law to disclose the country of origin of every ingredient. So you can rest assured that because it's 25 cents a pound and American honey is $2 a pound, there is the incentive of using the cheap imported honey and putting it in processed foods. And another one I heard correctly, imagine you are the honey packer. You are putting honey from 55-gallon drums into jars. And you have this 55-gallon drum from China that costs you 25 cents a pound, and this one from the American producer at $3 a pound. What is the temptation there? Blending them together and pouring them in a jar and putting the country of origin as USA, because you are saving $3 off on each pound that you mix together. And manufacturers, again, were convicted of mixing imported honey with American honey, and they're packaging it under their label saying made in a product of the United States. So people may tell you, oh, I don't buy honey in the grocery stores, I buy honey on the farmer's market from a local beekeeper. So do you realize that honey from the local beekeeper may not be local for at least two reasons? What's the first reason?
They're overwintering down south.
Maybe. First, because they may be moving their hives around. One time, I saw local honey for sale at the local health food store. I tasted it, and it looked so different from any honey I ever tasted from my hives. I asked them for the name of the local beekeeper they were getting it from. They gave me the name, and I know the guy, and he's this migratory beekeeper who hauls his bees all the way to Texas, and then the West Coast, and North, and so he is local. He lives 35 miles from here. But the bees are being tracked all around, so honey is not really local at all. What's the second reason why a jar of honey, given the place or where you live, say Kabul, Missouri, may not be even of Missouri origin at all? Danger. Yeah, well, if you place a product in a packaging, the name of the business on the packaging is not where you produce this honey, it's where you package it in retail packaging. So you can actually create a company that will have the name with bees or beehives or honey in the name of the company, but you are not required to be a beekeeper. So if your company is called Wonderful Chemical-Free Beehives LLC, and you are in Kabul, Missouri, this can be the name of the packaging company that's buying honey from all over the country and packages them here, putting the name of the local Kabul, Missouri business on the label, and that's perfectly legal. And I know personally family of beekeepers who have actually their own bees, 1,500 beehives, but they got the contract for their honey to be carried by Kroger supermarket. If you're accepted to Kroger distribution, 1,500 hives is nothing because you need to supply huge amounts year-round. So they started eventually buying their honey on the market. Now they bottle 3 55-gallon drums every week in their jars with their name on the label, and it's legal because they're now packers, but it doesn't have to be disclosed on the label, and it still has their label, their name of the business, and their hometown on it. So people think that it's coming from this hometown, but this is from outside the state at the moment. Alright, so now, if you have a local beekeeper that is really not migratory, they live there, and you can go and watch their bees, and they can pull the frame of honey from their beehive and extract it there and pour it in a jar for you and sell it to you. Doesn't really mean that this really local honey is necessarily good for you. Now, why not? What is at least two reasons why this honey may not really be great? Okay, I heard the word sugar, and this is a biggie, because most beekeepers, local or non-local, feed their bees sugar. The theory is, you're supposed to be feeding bees sugar, say, in the beginning of the year, before you put the supers on for them to store honey. And they think that if you feed your bees 25 pounds of sugar water in April, and then in May you put the supers on, the honey that ends up in the supers will not have any traces of the sugar that they fed in April, because they will have consumed all of the sugar. Do you think that this is how it works?
No.
No, because the bee, you never know whether they consumed it all or whether they put it in cells and then they mix everything. And when I was there at the World Beekeeping Congress in Canada 2 years ago, there was the official competition for the best honey in the world. But there was a condition: if you enter your jar, and you need to pay a fee for entering the competition, they will first send it to the lab to be analyzed for 3 things: illegal antibiotics and drugs, sugar, and these chemicals that are formed when you heat your honey to very high temperatures. So these 3 things, and if they find any of the 3, you are disqualified. So there were hundreds and hundreds of beekeepers who entered the honey for the best honey in the world. So guess which proportion of this sample was disqualified by the lab?
90.
Not as bad, but 45%, almost half, were disqualified. And you know, it was a big embarrassment, because instead of the blue ribbons, they had this display of their honeys with a big red sign saying, "Did not pass the lab inspection." And you would actually go and look which of the beekeepers and which brands didn't make it to the list. So, but you know what? The people who were entering their honey in the competition, and who were paying their money to compete in the competition, they knew up front that it will be analyzed in the lab. So, you know as a beekeeper for sure whether you used any illegal drugs in the hive or not. So I don't think that anybody who knowingly used illegal antibiotics there would enter their honey if they know they would get caught. You would know whether you heated your honey to 160 degrees or not. You will know. I think they didn't disclose which of the 45% was disqualified for what reason, but I think the vast majority of it was probably sugar, because beekeepers sincerely believe that you can give your bees as much sugar if you want in the spring, and then all this honey, sugar will be consumed, and then the honey will not have any traces of sugar, but it's just not true. Most of the honey from colonies that can be fed sugar will have traces of sugar in it. It's not all. There is a wonderful book about bee genetics written by the prominent American bee geneticist called The Spirit of the Hive, and there he describes what impact sugar syrup has on the bees when you feed them. I'm not talking about emergency feeding. Don't feel guilty about giving your swarm when you still don't have your own honey. If you give them 5 pounds of sugar to prop them up for a week, if you need to do it, just go ahead and do it, and don't feel guilty for it, because you save them by doing it. What I'm talking about is giving them a 5-gallon bucket of sugar syrup in the spring to bring them up to speed. And 5-gallon bucket is about the amount that people usually give. When I talked to an acquaintance of mine here in Italy, he now owns 5,000 beehives, and I asked, how much sugar water do you feed them? First he was reluctant to say, but eventually he told me, Leo, for my 5,000 beehives, I feed them 25,000 gallons of sugar syrup every year. This is why, if you go to the beekeeping catalogs like Dead End and Manley, you will see that in nutrition section, they're selling syrup by the tanker load on the 18-wheeler truck is what you can buy as commercial. Anyway, so this practice is huge. So when you ask me how much honey my bees produce, well, it's between 20 and 25 pounds per hive. And actually, when you go back in history and when you read how much bees were producing in the 19th century, you will see that this is about right. Depending on where you live, the average harvest was between 10 and 25 pounds. 15 or 12 pounds was probably the average. Today, beekeepers say, oh, like 15 pounds of honey per hive, that's absolutely nothing. Well, but 100 years ago, honey was less expensive than sugar, so feeding your bees sugar was not an option. So today, the beekeepers may be producing 75 pounds of honey per hive, but they feed their bees 60 pounds of syrup every year. So not only it contaminates honey and all, but this bee geneticist, Robert Page, describes in the book the spirit of the hive. If you feed your bees high concentration syrup, they do not know you are feeding them. They think they're getting some kind of very sweet nectar in nature, and it spoils them the same way as you can spoil children by putting them on a high sugar diet. Then you give them a candy bar before lunch and they won't want to touch lettuce or broccoli because it's not sweet. The same with the bees. You feed them for a prolonged period of time with dozens of pounds of sugar. They think it's some kind of sweet nectar, and then these spoiled bees go out after you stop feeding and they're looking for this plant that can have 50% sugar concentration in the nectar. And good luck, they won't find any. So instead of going for all the diversity of plants that may be very good for them but not as sweet, they will be ignoring them just as a spoiled child is ignoring vegetables in favor of chocolate. And not only that, this sweet tooth for the bees persists for 2 generations.
Wow.
The generation that was spoiled by the sugar feeding and the ones that were larvae when they were being fed the food prepared with the sugar, they will also have this sweet tooth. Interestingly, in this group, there was a beekeeper who is the gastroenterologist in St. Louis, and he told me after the lecture, Leo, that's exactly what we are finding with humans too. If the mother was living on junk food and soft drinks as a major part of her diet, the children of this mother will be craving sweet stuff and they will be more disposed to diabetes and more likely to get it at a very early age, compared to children who were not exposed in the womb to all of these high sugar diets. So the
If
same applies to
you're not feeding your fish sugar, can you write sugar-free on the label?
yeah, exactly. Like Orbit's chewing gum. Yeah.
If you're not fat-free and sugar-free.
Yeah, exactly. I actually pamper the formulation here because other things are in honey are sugar, it's just a different form of sugar. I developed this statement that is totally truthful. Table sugar is called sucrose. So you can truthfully put on your label that this food is naturally low on sucrose. One of the sweetest natural foods, a full pound of this honey has less sucrose than 2 teaspoons of table sugar. And it will be true. Alright, so sugar, feeding sugar, this is a big thing. You know, one time I got a call from the local recycling center, and they know me as a beekeeper because I used to get some cut-offs of lumber and plywood from them to build my equipment when I was starting. The manager calls me one day and says, Leo, I have a good surprise for you. Would you like to take delivery at no cost of 3 tractor-trailer loads of Mountain Dew soft drink? I first didn't understand why he was calling me. I said, you know, we don't drink that much Mountain Dew at my house. He said, no, that's not for you, that's for your bees. I said, for my bees? He said, yeah, of course, that's sugar water in aluminum cans. He explained that they received this contract for disposing of 3 trailer loads of Mountain Dew soft drink because it was out of date. I don't understand why it would have shelf life at all, but whatever date was stamped on the can, and I don't know where it ended up being stored for years, but anyway, whatever was stamped on the cans was out of date, so they couldn't legally put it through the supermarket chains. So the company needed to dump it safely somewhere. So they had a contract with this recycling center to salvage the aluminum cans, but they needed to drain the cans and crush the cans somewhere, and they couldn't do it within city limits in paper. If they dump it on the ground, there will be all of these wasps and bees and insects coming. If they dump it into the sewer system, it will ferment there and the pipes will explode underground. So they were looking for somewhere in the country, away from the city, to dump all of this sweet stuff. And the first person they called was a beekeeper they happened to know. So I refused, obviously, and I do not know what happened to all of this soft drink. But maybe some local beekeeper produced a wonderful and very unique tasting batch of honey that year. The other thing that you already mentioned about their local honey not necessarily being the top of the crop is the very big issue of our contamination with chemicals. There are two sources of our chemical contamination in honey. One is with the bees flying on spray crops that surround the hives. They can fly 2 miles from your hive, and if there are any commercial fields, they will pick up some pollution there. Yeah, thankfully, yes. Most of the modern pesticides have a very short breakdown window. They're most toxic on the day of the spraying. The following day, they're already much less toxic. So the best you can do is to be notified of the coming spraying. And in many states, they actually require to notify beekeepers of that. And then you need to confine the bees in the hive for that day. The best way to do it is to cover the entrance so they have air, but they cannot get out. And also put something black over it so that they don't see sun as much. Because if it's dark, they think it's still nighttime. They won't be trying as much getting out. Thank you. So, two sources of pollution of honey. One is the sprayed fields, but the other and the major source of chemical pollution of honey in America is, thank you, beekeepers themselves putting chemical treatments into the hives to kill the varroa mites. Now, there is exactly the same logic that does not hold with the chemical treatments. They say, oh, you put chemicals into the brood box before you put the supers on. That's on every label, and that's how it's approved by EPA. So they're saying you can put this toxic chemical into the lower box for a few days, then remove the strips, and then you can start putting honey supers on, and honey in the supers will not have any traces of this pesticide from the lower box. Do you think this is how it works?
No.
Of course not. Michael Bush, the famous natural beekeeper from Nebraska, I heard him speak at the state convention in St. Louis. So he drove saying, hoping that you can put the toxic stuff in one corner of the hive and will not pollute the rest of the hive is exactly the same thing as to pee in one corner of the swimming pool. On the assumption that water will be crystal clear everywhere except this corner. So it also doesn't hold up to scrutiny when university professors went and they took samples of honey and wax and pollen made in America. We're not even talking about China anymore. Made in America. Do you know what they found? 45% of certified organic honey sold in America contains Roundup. Roundup in 45% of organic honey. It's even higher than non-organic honey. This is because the certified organic standards only deal with how you as the beekeeper manage the hive. If you're not putting any poisons, but the bees bring poisons for the field, that's totally fine. Your honey can be organic even though it's high in all of this pollution. The average number of chemicals they're finding is like a dozen different chemicals in every jar of honey. And there is a country song called American Honey that you may have heard, or you can listen to it on YouTube. And it's not about honey to eat, it's about a girl who was the sweetheart in Honey, and how she was growing up in the rural America. And there is a line in this song, she was as pure as American honey. Remember that? It's probably a compliment to tell a girl 100 years ago, but today any girl who knows how pure American honey really is, it would be an insult to a slap in the face. Here is an example of our where is that? I wanted to show you an extract from our
I wonder what he's gonna do with it being 4 o'clock.
Well, we skipped our break, so that does
Maybe.
like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So if you search online for pesticide and honey, you'll find lots and lots of articles like this that are called High Levels of Herbicides and Agrochemicals in North American Acres, Implications for Honey Health. Well, I would want to know about implications for human health too, but forget about that. So, and this article put out by the major universities like Penn State University, United States Department of Agriculture. There are 8 pages of tables in small print that list all of the chemicals they found in these samples. And not only that, you cannot see it obviously there, but it tells you what is the proportion of the samples that they found this chemical in. So for example, these 2 chemicals, they found in 98% of the samples. That means 98 jars of 100 that they sampled, they contain this stuff. And they may be 50-60%, but the average is the mixture of 12 different chemicals found in every jar. That's why you cannot completely avoid it if you live close to agricultural fields. If you live in suburban or in the city, your honey will actually be more pure than in the countryside, ironically, because the amount of pesticides sprayed in the city is not nearly the same as what you will see on sprayed fields. Unless your municipality is treating it repeatedly with mosquito spray or something like that. Alright, so not only honey is free of added sugar and chemicals, what about the diversity of plants that go into the makeup of the honey? Many of the honeys can be pure and good and organic, but most of it is coming from a very shallow pool of nectars. What is America's #1 source of honey?
Clover.
Clover, just one plant. When you put your bees in the wilderness, like here, there will be a succession of plants from the early spring. This is redbud, dandelions, and blackberries, and knapweed, and buttonbush, and blazing star, and sumac, and on and on and on. So the resulting product will be a mixture of nectars from a wide variety of plants. And the taste itself will never be the same because of different seasons producing different flowers. And in Europe, they actually are very good in documenting what plants were in bloom when they were producing this jar of honey. It's not just wildflower honey. On each jar in the back, you will have a list of plants that were in bloom in this location when this jar was produced. I found it very remarkable. Another thing is that with the horizontal hive, it's very easy to segregate the different flavors of honey, even from the same hive. Imagine the entrance is on this end of the hive, away from you, and when I start pulling honey from the back of the hive, understanding that bees feel the phrase in the sequence starting with the entrance. So when you start pulling from here, it's like going back in time and reading in a book what was in bloom in this week, and the week before that, and the week before that. Of course, it's not exactly like that. There is a lot of mixing, but the general picture is the same. from one hive you can like pull 5 distinctly different flavors. The ones in the back may be very dark, coming from the fall plants now, like asters, a very full-bodied and sometimes even deeper honey, and strong flavored. I like strong flavored honeys, but not many people don't care for that. Then maybe honey, if you have very hot weather in July and August, you may have some honeydew honey, which is produced by aphids, feeding on the oak trees and the black walnuts, and the bees come to the aphids and like ants, lick up some of the sweet liquid and make honey with that. It can be very dark and very bitter, but with the taste of oak or recognizable taste of black walnuts in it. Very unique. I like that too. Then early in the season there will be sumacs, they are orangey, and there will be blackberries that are very light colored, but this is from one hive. So if instead of blending everything together in one barrel, you are harvesting honey frames and you just segregate them by color, put them in piles. This looks orangey in color, put in one pile. This is very dark, like dark amber, put in another pile. And this is very light pale lemony color, put it in third pile. Extract the frames of the same color first, drain it and bottle it. Extract the other color next, extract it and bottle it.
You can
and
tell the
third
color,
one.
you can tell the color in this range though?
Huh?
You can tell the color?
Oh yeah, yeah, this will be very, very distinct. They will be like that. Some will be very dark looking, some will be lighter looking, and the hues of yellow will be also very
He's
different.
saying in the comb itself.
Huh?
He's saying the color of the comb
Oh,
itself.
yes, exactly. So the dark one, we're coming to this next. They come from the brood chamber that's very dark and black, but also affect the taste of honey. Actually, the reason why I wanted to have my own bees, one of the major ones, is that as a child I was eating a lot of this black comb honey. This was the greatest delicacy. I will explain in a second why. In this country, you will never buy this black comb honey because it comes from the brood chamber. The black color comes from brood raised there repeatedly until the frame becomes black, after which the bees will fill it with honey. So why do American beekeepers not sell this very dark honey from the brood chamber?
Because everybody thinks it should be gold.
Huh?
Everybody thinks it should be gold.
Not exactly. The primary reason is that the brood chamber, where this kind of honey is produced, is repeatedly treated with chemicals against the raw mites, so they're actually not allowed to sell it for human consumption in this country. But if you are a treatment-free beekeeper, you can safely enjoy yourself and sell this wonderful product, and I brought you a jar, coming from the brood chamber. So, first, let me finish discussion of the diversity of flowers. When you have that much diversity and you extract it separately, one of the advantages is you can cater to different tastes of your potential clients. And somebody who would not enjoy just a single taste of honey may enjoy one of the 5 tastes you have to offer, and you still made a sale. Not only that, but because the diversity of flowers every year will be different, my customers know that if they come across a flavor that they like, they need to stock up now. Because the flavor of my honey next year from the same hive and same bees may be different because we may get the rain at the other time of the year. I'll give you a real life example. Most of the time in April, it rains a lot and the flowers of our wild plums do not produce much nectar because everything is washed out by the rain. But a year ago, 2 years ago, we had a wonderful April with little rain, and we had a batch of honey that was impregnated with the fragrance of peaches and wild plums, just because the weather was favorable for this. 2 years ago, we had very warm, or a year ago, we had very warm March, and there was a lot of maple trees in bloom, and I had a small batch of spring honey that tasted like maple syrup, exactly like maple syrup. Amazing. So one year we had a batch of honey that tasted like wild grapes. What happened that year is that the hot freeze killed the flowers early in September instead of mid-October as we usually have the first freeze. But at that time there were still a lot of wild grapes ripe on the trees, on the vines in the woods, and bees were salvaging this juice from the grapes enough to flavor the honey with the taste of grape jelly. So this dark honey, the dark honey itself imparts a very strong fruity flavor to it. It tastes like dates or prunes or dried pears, dried fruit in general. Here is an example of two jars that come from the same comb. One patch of the comb was dark because that's where the brood was reared, and the other patch of the comb was white. So nectar there was obviously uniform. We scooped up some from two different parts of the same comb with a spoon, and the color was much darker, obviously, and the flavor was very different on the same comb. Now, but the most important part why I really like the darker comb honey is pollen. You may have seen the big pollen sold in health food stores as pellets. This is the pollen that they capture at the entrance of the hive, putting a special cage, and the foragers returning with pollen. In order to go into the hive, they squeeze through the cage, and this pollen is being rubbed off them and falls into a container and then is collected and sold to you. However, the best quality pollen is the one that bees bring inside the nest. They put it into cells, they mix it with the nectar, and then it ferments, and they use the same lactobacteria as we use for sauerkraut or for yogurt. So this is natural probiotic to good. So, and this is nutritionally the most valuable part of the hive. So if you have some black comb honey, like this one, that you don't want to give back to the bees, but you cut it, slice it open, or even look at the sun through it, and you see that it's all filled with the space inside, and you won't be able to spin it out in the extractor. Instead, you mash it with a potato masher, and then you put it in one of these hand crank honey presses, and you start cranking it down, and you will see these chunks of pollen being squeezed out and flowing into the jar. And if you capture bee pollen, which is what many people buy local honey for, then you are getting the highest possible nutrition from your honey. And I'm completely sold out of this one. I sell the big brand variety honey for $100 a pound, and that's what I'm selling sold out for all the time first. But I have some personal reserve jar that we're enjoying at home, so I'll put it there on the table during the break for you to enjoy. The flavor you will recognize is completely different. It tastes like dried apricots because of the high pollen count in there. And again, nutritionally, it's through the roof.
So this is bee bread?
So this is what I call bee bread. Well, this is a mixture of honey and bee bread when you press it together. So this one, well, what I brought it here, it's all squeezed together. So when I looked at it under the microscope, it's approximately 20% by volume or weight in pollen, and the rest is honey. But even a jar like that will have more pollen in it than 3 55-gallon drums of conventional extractor.
Wow.
So it's super concentrated. My daughter even cannot eat it by the teaspoon. I eat it by the teaspoon, but she can only take like at the tip of a knife because otherwise she has reactions similar to vitamin overdose. If you take too much vitamin, you can have hives, or you can get itchy or irritated. Like that's the kind of reaction she gets. So I suggest just, we'll have some popsicle sticks. Just get a good chunk. It's not every day you can taste this kind of honey, but realize that if you regularly use it for consumption, don't overdo it because it's really super food. 1 pound of that honey will probably contain something like 10 billion pollen. It's astronomical compared to what they have in conventional honey.
It might be
Okay,
for
if you do
not
not
to have your
have
shots in the morning.
honey press, which is the best way for squeezing it out, one homemade solution is to take 2 buckets, put all of the honey in the top bucket with the nylon sock, and let it drip through the holes in this bucket into the next bucket down. But through experience, most of the bee bread will be left behind because it is too solid for it. So if you are harvesting bee bread, putting it through this honey press is the way to go. Another homemade solution temporarily is to take the chunks of comb with all the bee bread and honey and put it in a very powerful blender. Don't do it a large quantity at once because it is very viscous and difficult for the blender to spin. But then you can also turn it into a paste that will look more like mustard and will also be very, very high quality.
Will they have the wax?
Yeah, there will be some wax too. Yeah. But if you squeeze it in the press, the wax will stay behind in the basket of the press and only bee bread and honey will be squeezed out. So this is the preferred method.
What was the other color of honey you had, can't see through it? It was like a couple of bags.
Oh, what's the matter?
That
This
Yeah.
one?
one, yeah.
Well, this is, if your honey is full of pollen, it will solidify very quickly with very smooth texture like peanut butter, and this is called creamed honey. Except today, creamed honey is done artificially. They put a starter there, and there are special machines that keep mixing it like ice cream until it's creamed up, whipped up. But in nature, this is how honey turns if it has very high pollen count. And actually, Lenz himself was saying in his time, people were wanting to see honey like that, solidified and very smooth because they knew it was the best thing. And also, it is indication that this honey has not been heat treated. Okay, very quickly, I'll mention that in addition to all the wonderful properties we discussed in honey, I discovered that for your potential customers, many of them want to hear how you treat your bees. Because with all the information about bees being used as just a small disposable thing in commercial big beekeeping, many people, those who follow a vegan diet, for example, they don't use any animal products, including bees. But I have customers who are vegans, and they have no problem with eating my honey because they understand that for me, bees come first. They live in good, nice hives that I feel better than my house is. And they always subsist on their honey first, and I only take the surplus that they won't be able to consume themselves. So with this, I also give the honey to spend all the time it needs in the hive to fully ripen. When I pull it in October, all the cells are capped. And this is also different compared to conventional honey. Much of the conventional honey is being pulled from the hive prematurely, and then it's put in special dehydrators, similar to how they boil down the maple syrup. And then there is a fan and hot oil, and they boil down nectar by the machine so that the bees can keep bringing new nectar instead of wasting their energies on making honey. And then, we process it. We don't get it to scan. This is the scratching of the cappings. We put it in the extractor. And when we bottle it, we only use glass jars. I first was packaging my honey in plastic because most of it goes by mail order. But my customers told me, Leo, it's a shame to be packaging $100 pound honey in plastic. It needs to be in glass jars, and we don't mind paying extra shipping as long as it's the high-end product. So that's how I package my honey now. And instead of the label, I like using the tag that opens like a small book. And it's very inexpensive to produce, actually almost as cheap as printing labels. Because in reality, it is a full-color business card printed on both sides. When I print them in increments of 10,000, they're just 2 cents a piece plus shipping. But then I can give the short version of this stock there with what makes my honey unique, and it falls, you punch it in the corner, and these ribbons that you attach it with, they're sold in like hobby supply stores. When you buy the whole bag of them, they're also very inexpensive. For something like 7 or 10 cents, you can have this very nice looking packaging, and people actually read what's written inside. And of course, my honey is raw, not filtered, and all of the other things that people like are describing their honey with.
You can also put that on,
Huh?
I think the same question, is it move from the extractor straight into the jar? Is there no processing?
Yeah, no crossing between. Well, because I do have small beetles in my hives, when I pour it from the extractor, there may be a small beetle or two that falls from the frame of the extractor, and I don't want it to be that natural. So I do strain it. It's not filtering, it's just straining it from this stainless steel strainer into a bucket and then bottling from the bucket just to get small beetles from. If you live in the north when there are no small beetles, I wouldn't probably even bother with the strain. Just straight into the earth. We don't have much time to talk about other exciting things. I want to have a break and then finish discussion of honey plants. I will just mention that there are many other possibilities. One is cut home honey. You can cut out the chunk, put it in a mason jar, and many people enjoy it like that. There are flavored honeys. I don't really have a taste for flavored honeys. But listen, in this country, people consume much more chocolate or ice cream than honey. So people like different flavors. So I know a family who is supplementing their income very well with bees by mixing their honey with all kinds of flavorings. Natural flavorings like cranberry juice or chocolate or something else. And they produce varieties of flavored honeys that sells for them much better and brings them a better price than just plain straight honey. Mead, the best formula for making mead is in this book. We'll have a special course for making mead and honey processing next fall. So if you're interested to learn the best techniques and to drink, it's all there. But all in this book. One, you don't need a special starter like the commercial yeast for that. Leyens was starting his mead using bee bread as the starter because bee bread already has the natural enzymes in it. And he's describing, and I can attest to that this bee bread is excellent. The reason few people do it this way is that these enzymes in bee bread are not, and the yeasts in bee bread are not as aggressive. So instead of fermentation for 6 weeks, it's actually taking more like 2 years to ferment. But it's very, very slow and very smooth. I'm not an alcohol drinker myself, but the quality of this mead is exceptional for those who enjoy this. We already talked about propolis. So one way to harvest propolis in large quantities is to have this screen that you put into the hive. So when you harvest your honey, if instead of the solid divider board, you were to put this screen, you need to do it about 4 weeks before the first frost down to give bees the time during the warm weather to fill the screen with propolis. But when the bees in the fall, with the nights getting colder, they see all these cracks in their home, they do what we do. They want to winterize their nest and they practically filling it all with propolis to seal out all of the drafts. So if instead of this solid divider board after honey harvest, you put this screen after the last frame, again, it needs to be 4 weeks before the end of the season so they have some time to actually fill it with propolis. This is the time when they will be producing a lot. I will be actually doing it next week, going to my strong hive and pulling the last few frames of honey and putting this in. And by mid-October, a screen like that, it can be also on both sides of the colony, will be filled with their propolis. I put it in a freezer for 48 hours and it becomes brittle at room temperature and then it flexes like that and pops out. And a strong colony can produce about 1 pound of propolis, sometimes more. And treatment-free propolis is $150 per pound or more. So just as the simple trick with a screen like that, you can create this wonderful and beneficial product from your hive.
So where did you say you put in the hive, how far back?
So, no, it's exactly the same sequence that we did when you put honey frames. There is this empty section, so you separate the empty section from the frames using the screen instead of the solid divider.
Okay.
And you do it early enough first that the bees still have some warm weather to fly out of the hive, collect propolis, bring it, and fill it here.
So yours is already in, you're not just now putting it in.
I'm just now putting it in because in the summer they don't collect much. The weather is still warm, so they're not winterizing. They fill it with propolis mostly when they're preparing the nest for winter.
Okay, so put it in now,
So
and then you're gonna pull it
I'm
up.
confused. Is he gonna go
Yeah,
and do
when the
two
rest
rest
of
of
the
the
time is
classes?
full, I will pull it and replace it with a small wire.
Continue, yeah.
All right, I promise we'll take a break in 5 minutes, just a few small slides. This is how I render my beeswax. Two ways to render the beeswax. One, you can put it in a cotton cloth, like older pillowcase or an old t-shirt with no printing design. You make a bundle, put it in boiling water, and all in the impurities will stay behind in the bundle, and the wax will go through this filter of the cotton cloth and float to the surface, and then when it cools down, it will be a pancake of clean wax on the top. I use the wax melter, solar wax melter. It's an insulated box with a double glazed cover. You place it there, again over the filter. There is an older sheet, and there, the sun melts wax, it drips through this layer of cotton cloth into some kind of container you have underneath. There is actually a stainless steel pan, and it's tilted, and at the bottom of this pan here, there is a long container collection of all the dripping wax. You can use candles and beauty products and on and on and on and on. Possibilities are endless.
You mostly get that from old spent glass that you're pulling out.
Exactly, the one that is so dark and that you don't have any good use for it anymore. To conclude, in your handouts, there is an article I wrote for Bee Culture magazine called The Magic of Honey Sales. And I tell you here that for me, the greatest problem of selling my honey was to overcome the feeling of guilt over selling my honey at 20 and then 30 and then 50 and then $100 a pound. Someone told me, Leo, you're a greedy elitist. You have all of this marketing training from your business school, so you are skilled enough to be selling honey only to rich folks who can afford that much for a jar of honey. He said, you need to be, more democratic, no matter you live in Missouri. Produce some honey for the rest of us for $5 a pound so that simple working folks like me can go ahead and afford your honey. I was thinking and thinking, I realized I would never be able to produce my honey at $5 a pound. And so for a number of years I felt like a greedy elitist. But then I felt better through two ways. One was this book, The Art of one was my customer who lives on Social Security, and she keeps coming every year and buying a few jars of honey. And I once apologized to her, knowing that $100 is a lot of money for her, that my honey is so expensive. And she said, Leo, your honey is not expensive for what it is. She said, I specifically buy it not as a food but as medicine. I have awful hay fever, and the drugs that my physician has given me, they make everything worse, and I have terrible side effects. Your honey works better without any side effects, and it's actually cheaper than the drugs that I prescribe. So she says, it's not expensive for what it's worth. And then the other part of my resolution came from the Art of Soaring book that I translated from you, Russian. And this describes the techniques that
Read
are
that one
coming from
first.
the ancient Russian culture. If something is making you feel negative, feeling of guilt or frustration or anything, it can be anything. Finances, politics, health issues, personal relationships. One of the techniques there, you need to change the situation in your mind so that instead of being stressed over it, you feel laughing over it and let it go. So one of the techniques is to take the situation and make a whimsical poem that will present everything in such an exaggerated light that you will be laughing at it every time you think of it. So I wrote this poem that I will read to you, and there is more in your handouts that helped me just laughingly sell my honey for the price I feel it deserves without feeling any remorse over that. It's called Flying Out the Door. I wake up in the morning, open my eyes, and lo, 10,000 jars of honey are flying out the door. It is not even puzzling. I've read in ancient lore that honey jars love buzzing when flying out the door. I'm fixing a fish sandwich with honeycomb galore to share with the bees which are flying out the door. My daughter's friendly pony hauls barrels to and fro, filled with my sumac honey that's flying out the door. A spaceship lands, and aliens whom no one saw before arrive to buy some honey that's flying out the door. Who's that? That's Oprah calling. Would you come to my show to talk of jars of honey flying out your door? Hollywood producers take shifts, sleep on the floor, filming jars of honey flying out the door. The airport controllers trust their screens no more. Skies filled with jars of honey flying out the door. Mailbox stuffed with letters, orders by the score, and honey for that matter just flies outside my door. My darling lovely honey, she cannot pack no more 3 tons of ordered honey that's flying out the door. Behold the new times coming, waves stick to pea-bread shores, 1,000,000 jars of honey flying out the door. I'm walking in a bee suit, I wield a cedar orb, my home's a hive, jars soaring and flying out the door. Thank you. All right, thank you for your attention. I know it's been another very long session. Here's some bee bread honey. Excuse the packaging. It is from a clean jar from peanut butter, organic peanut butter, and that's what we're enjoying every day in small quantity at home.